When this police officer headed out for duty on a bright Tuesday morning, he began to notice something unusual. People were pointing at him, whispering to each other, and some even had wide grins on their faces. This wasn't the kind of reaction he normally received while on patrol. What was going on? He wondered. Curious, he turned around, and what he saw made his heart skip a beat. The streets of Los Angeles often bring to mind images of classic Hollywood, tall palm trees, and endless sunshine. It's one of the busiest cities in the country, a place where you can always count on running into crowds of people and, every now and then, a few animals. Most of those animals are beloved pets with collars and tags, eager to get back home after a short walk. But sometimes strays wander the streets, lonely, hungry, and unsure where to go. Some of them are lucky and find their families again. Others end up in shelters, waiting and hoping for a second chance. Most animals don't get to pick their owners, but the dog in this story was different. This little stray seemed determined to choose his person, and he walked straight up to a police officer, as if asking to be adopted. It all began on that bright Tuesday morning. Officer Marcato of the LAPD had to start his shift earlier than usual, so he woke up before dawn and got ready for the day. It happened to be his birthday, and he was already in a great mood. His morning began with a tender surprise. His wife and children had woken him with a cheerful birthday song and handed him handwritten notes filled with love and gratitude. By the time he reached the station, his spirits were already high. There, his co-workers greeted him with smiles, jokes, and thoughtful gifts. He couldn't believe how perfect everything was turning out. He figured the surprises were over, but he was wrong. The biggest one was waiting for him outside. When it was time to hit the streets, Marcato teamed up with his partner, Officer Tavera. They climbed into their patrol car and rolled out of the LAPD station. The morning was unusually calm. No calls, no emergencies, just sunshine over the city and a rare moment of peace. Once they reached Hobart Boulevard, they got out of the car and began walking the neighborhood. At first, everything seemed normal. A few people passed by, most of them barely glancing at the officers. But then something changed. Marcato noticed more and more people turning their heads to look at him. Some even stopped walking altogether, their eyes lighting up with amusement. A few were pointing, grinning, even taking out their phones. What in the world is happening? Marcato thought, slightly self-conscious. Finally, he turned around, and the mystery was solved. Just a few feet away, trotting proudly down the sidewalk, was a tiny puppy. His fur was scruffy, his ears slightly uneven, and his paws far too big for his body. But his little tail wagged furiously as he patted after Marcato, his tongue lolling in a wide, happy smile. The sight made Marcato laugh out loud. The puppy stopped right at his boots, sat down as though he had claimed his spot, and looked up at him with sparkling eyes. The people nearby began clapping softly, charmed by the sight of a uniformed officer with an uninvited four-legged shadow. "You're such a sweet boy," Marcato said softly, crouching to pat the pup. The dog leaned into his touch, his whole body wriggling with joy. Standing again, Marcato looked around, hoping someone might recognize the puppy. "Does anyone know who he belongs to?" he called out. A few people shook their heads. One woman spoke up. "I've seen him around here a couple of times. Poor thing, I think he's a stray." The words struck Marcato harder than he expected. He looked down at the little dog, who was still wagging his tail as if nothing in the world could bring him down. How long had he been wandering alone? How many nights had he slept hungry on the streets? Duty pulled at him. He and Tavera still had a patrol to finish, but the puppy didn't care about schedules. No matter where Marcato walked, the dog followed closely at his heels. Every so often, Marcato crouched down to rub his fur, and the pup responded by licking his fingers as though they had always belonged together. Officer Tavera couldn't stop smiling. "You've made a new best friend," she teased. When the pup still didn't leave, Tavera knew she had to capture the moment. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos, and even recorded a short video of Marcato walking with his tiny shadow. She posted it on the LAPD's social media page, writing, "Looks like Officer Marcato picked up an unexpected partner today on Hobart Boulevard." Within minutes, the post went viral. Comments flooded in. "Someone adopt this sweet pup. He's clearly chosen his officer. Best birthday gift ever." The city seemed to fall in love with the puppy overnight. As Marcato and Tavera discussed what to do, She turned to him with a smile. He needs a name. How about Hobart, after the street where he found us? Marcato looked at the little pup, who was now curled up at his feet as if he belonged there. Hobart, he repeated softly. The dog's ears perked up at the sound, as though he approved. By the end of the shift, Marcato knew he couldn't just leave Hobart behind. He brought the puppy to a local vet to check for a microchip. None was found. Hobart was truly on his own, until now. That night, Marcato returned home with more than just stories from his patrol. His wife and children rushed to greet him at the door, and their eyes widened when they saw the scruffy little pup in his arms. "Meet Hobart," Marcato said with a grin. "He followed me to work today, and I think he wants to stay." The children squealed with delight, immediately kneeling down to pet him. Hobart responded by showering them with happy licks, his tail wagging so hard it looked like it might fly off. Marcato's wife smiled knowingly. "Looks like you got the best birthday present of all." From that day forward, Hobart was no longer a stray. He became part of Marcato's family and, in his own way, part of the LAPD family too. Photos of Hobart curled up at Marcato's boots or riding happily in the patrol car continued to circulate online, bringing smiles to thousands of people. The little dog who had once wandered the streets alone had chosen his person, and in doing so, had found the forever home he had been searching for. And for Officer Marcato, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts in life don't come wrapped in boxes. They walk up to you, tail wagging, and never let you go. From that moment on, the little pup was no longer just another stray wandering the streets. He had a name, Hobart, and names carry weight. They mean belonging, recognition, identity. To the officer's surprise, the puppy seemed to recognize it almost instantly. His ears flicked at the sound, his head tilted with curiosity, and each time they called him, his tail wagged like a tiny engine, proud and certain that this was his. For the first time in what might have been weeks, maybe months, he wasn't invisible anymore. As the patrol shift crept toward its end, both officers felt a heaviness settle in. They'd seen a lot on the streets, broken lives, hard choices, and moments where they wished they could do more. But saying goodbye to Hobart felt different. It wasn't just another case of finding a stray. Something about the pup's loyalty, the way he trotted beside them like he'd always been part of their unit, tugged at them in ways they hadn't expected. When they returned to the patrol car, Hobart made his intentions crystal clear. He darted around the vehicle, circling it like a soldier refusing to leave formation. He pawed at the doors, his eyes pleading, his little body practically bouncing with determination. He wanted in, needed in. It was obvious this pup had no plans to be left behind. Marcato glanced at Tavera, and in that quiet look, they both admitted the same truth. They couldn't just drive away. Not after the bond that had begun to form. Not after Hobart had already started to trust them. With a sigh that carried both responsibility and resolve, Marcato bent down, scooped Hobart into his arms, and set him inside the car. The pup wasted no time making himself comfortable. He hopped onto the front seat like he'd done it 100 times before, nose pressed to the window, tail sweeping happily across the upholstery. It was as if he was saying, "This is where I belong." Back at the station, Hobart became the center of attention. Officers who had just returned from long shifts, carrying the weight of the city on their shoulders, couldn't help but smile as the little dog trotted up to greet them. For a few minutes, the station's usual buzz of radios and reports was replaced by laughter. But when Marcato and Tavera began digging into Hobart's past, the truth they uncovered was sobering. Hobart had once belonged to someone. He hadn't been born wild, hadn't grown up with no one to care for him. Someone had once fed him, sheltered him, maybe even loved him, and then abandoned him. That knowledge carried a sting. For every Hobart, there were thousands more. Across the United States, animal welfare groups estimate there are nearly 70 million stray animals. Millions of stories like Hobart's, left wandering alleys, streets, and backyards, waiting for someone to notice, for someone to care. Of those millions, only a fraction ever find shelter walls to keep them safe. Most remain outside, struggling against hunger, sickness, and dangers they should never have faced. As much as Marcato wanted to keep him, he knew the rules, knew the responsibilities that came with taking a stray home. He had a family waiting for him, and decisions like this couldn't be made lightly. So, with a heavy heart, he made the call he believed was best. He would take Hobart to a safe place, a shelter where people could find him, where he could be cared for properly. The ride there was different. Hobart, who had been all wiggles and joy before, now sat quietly. He didn't press his nose against the glass, didn't try to play. Instead, he curled up on the seat as though he already knew. Dogs have a way of sensing things, of reading the spaces between our words. Maybe he understood he was being left behind. When they reached the Ghetto Rescue Foundation, the staff welcomed Hobart with open arms. They were used to heartbreak, but they were also used to hope. And Hobart, with his gentle eyes and soft, trusting nature, made their job easy. Within minutes, he was winning them over, one wag of his tail at a time. Marcato walked out of the shelter, but something in him didn't. His footsteps felt heavier that day, and when he went home, Hobart stayed with him, in his thoughts, in the silence between conversations, in the little ache behind his ribs. He tried to sleep, but the image of Hobart curled up in that shelter cage replayed over and over. What if no one came for him? What if days turned into weeks? Would he still wag his tail for strangers? Would he lose that spark? 3 days passed, 3 long days of quiet guilt, of unfinished thoughts. By the 4th morning, Marcato didn't hesitate. He climbed into his car and drove straight back to the shelter. The staff smiled knowingly the moment he walked in. They had seen this before, the ones who left but never really left. Without a word, they guided him down the corridor to Hobart's cage. Hobart wasn't the same playful pup Marcato remembered. The light in his eyes had dimmed, his energy dulled. But the moment their eyes met, everything reignited. Hobart leapt to his feet, tail wagging furiously, body trembling with joy. When the cage door swung open, he bolted straight into Marcato's arms, covering his hands and feet in eager licks as if to say, "I knew you'd come back." Marcato bent down, scooped him up, and whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "It's time to go home." This time, there were no doubts, no hesitations. Hobart wasn't just a stray anymore, he was family. Back at home, Hobart slid seamlessly into his new life. Marcato's wife and children adored him instantly. The house seemed brighter with him there, laughter coming a little easier, smiles lasting a little longer. Even at the station, Hobart became a beloved presence. Officers joked about him being their newest recruit or emotional support buddy. Someone even made him a tiny badge. The LAPD's social media team couldn't resist sharing his story. "Welcome to LAPD, Hobart." The post read. Days later, another update followed. "So many of you have been asking about Hobart. We're happy to share that Officer Marcato has adopted him, and he's now living the good life with Marcato and his family." And indeed, Hobart was. His days of hunger and uncertainty were over. Now he had love, security, and a forever home. It's hard not to smile at a story like this. A lost little pup, a kind-hearted officer, a second chance at life. Stories like Hobart's remind us that goodness still exists. That in a world often full of struggle, there are still moments of grace, still bonds waiting to be formed, still happy endings waiting to be written.
If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.